A student's overview of the Ageless wisdom was carefully compiled from the following books by Alice A. Bailey. A Treatise on Cosmic Fire. Esoteric Psychology, Volumes 1 and 2. Esoteric Healing. Esoteric Astrology. The Rays and the Initiations. Students are encouraged to download the free PDF version of this overview by following the link in the video's description, or to order a printed copy at cost from thebookpatch.com, but are advised to read the original, unabridged books in order to gain deeper insight into the ageless wisdom. Students are also invited to join our online study group at facebook.com/groups/students of the ageless wisdom. Chapter 58 Esoteric Healing. You will note that the various words I have chosen in considering the basic requirements have been so chosen for their specific meanings. 1. The work of restitution signifies the returning of the form to the basic reservoir of substance, or of the soul, the divine spiritual energy, returning to its source, either on soul or monadic levels, according to the point in evolution. This restitution is predominantly the work of the human soul within the physical body and involves both the heart and the head centers. These three processes are death. 2. The art of elimination refers to two activities of the inner spiritual man, i.e., the elimination of all control by the threefold lower man, and the process of refocusing itself upon the concrete levels of the mental plane as a point of radiant light. This concerns primarily the human soul. 3. The processes of integration deal with the work of the liberated spiritual man as he blends with the soul, the oversoul, upon the higher levels of the mental plane. The part returns to the whole, and the man comprehends the true meaning of the words of Krishna, having pervaded this whole universe with a fragment of myself, I remain. He, too, the conscious experiencing fragment which has pervaded the little universe of the form in the three worlds, still remains. He knows himself to be a part of the whole. It will be obvious to you that when humanity attains this outlook upon the fact of death or the art of dying, the entire attitude of the race of men will undergo beneficent change. There are, speaking in the larger sense, three major death episodes. 1. There is, first of all, the constant recurrence of the fact of physical death. This is familiar to all of us through its extreme frequency, could we but realize it. This recognition would rapidly eliminate the present fear of death. There is then the second death spoken of in the Bible, which is in this present planetary cycle associated with the death of all astral control over the human being. In the larger sense, this second death is consummated at the fourth initiation, when even spiritual aspiration dies, being no more needed. The will of the initiate is now fixed and immovable, and astral sensitivity is no longer required. 2. There is a curious counterpart to this experience upon a much lower level in the death of all astral emotion which takes place for the individual aspirant at the time of the second initiation. It is then a complete episode and is consciously registered. Between the second and the third initiations, the disciple has to demonstrate a continuity of non-response to astralism and emotionalism. The second death, to which I am here referring, has to do with the death or the disappearance of the causal body at the time of the fourth initiation. This marks the completion of the building of the Antakarana and the institution of direct, unimpeded continuity of relationship between the monad and the personality. 3. The third death takes place when the initiate leaves behind him, finally and with no prospect of return, all relation with the cosmic physical plane. This death, necessarily, lies far ahead for all in the hierarchy and is at present only possible and permissible for a few in the council chamber at Shambhala. It is not, however, a process through which Sanat Kumara will pass. He underwent this transformation many eons ago, during the great cataclysm which inaugurated the Lemurian Age, and which was induced by his cosmic experience and the need for an inflow of energy from extraplanetary beings. We have consequently, when considering the death of a human being, to employ the word death in relation to two phases in which it functions. 1. Phase 1, the death of the physical etheric body. This phase falls into two stages. A. That in which the atoms which constitute the physical body are restored to the source from whence they came. This source is the sum total of the matter of the planet, constituting the dense physical body of the planetary life. B. That in which the etheric vehicle, composed of an aggregation of forces, returns these forces to the general reservoir of energy. This dual phase covers the process of restitution. End of page 297. 2. Phase 2, the rejection, as it is sometimes called, of the mental-emotional vehicles. These form, in reality, only one body. To it the early Theosophists gave the name of the Karma-manasic body or the vehicle of desire mind. I have said elsewhere that there is no such thing as the astral plane or the astral body. Just as the physical body is made up of matter which is not regarded as a principle, so the astral body, as far as the mind nature is concerned, is in the same category. This is a difficult matter for you to grasp because desire and emotion are so real and so devastatingly important. But, speaking literally, from the angle of the mental plane, the astral body is a figment of the imagination, it is not a principle. The massed use of the imagination in the service of desire has nevertheless constructed an illusory glamorous world, the world of the astral plane. During physical incarnation, and when a man is not upon the path of discipleship, the astral plane is very real, with a vitality and a life all its own. After the first death, the death of the physical body, it still remains equally real. But its potency slowly dies out. The mental man comes to realize his own true state of consciousness, whether developed or undeveloped, and the second death becomes possible and takes place. This phase covers the process of elimination. When these two phases of the art of dying are over, the discarnate soul stands free from the control of matter, it is purified, temporarily by the phases of restitution and elimination, from all contamination by substance. This is achieved, not through any activity of the soul in form, the human soul, but as a result of the activity of the soul on its own plane abstracting the fraction of itself which we call the human soul. It is primarily the work of the overshadowing soul which effects this. It is not carried forward by the soul in the personality. The human soul, during this stage, is only responsive to the pull or the attractive force of the spiritual soul as it, with deliberate intent, extracts the human soul from its imprisoning sheaths. Later on, as the evolutionary processes proceed and the soul increasingly controls the personality, it will be the soul within the imprisoning sheaths which will bring about, consciously and with intention, the phases of dying. In the earlier stages, this release will be brought about with the aid of the overshadowing spiritual soul. Later on, when the man is living upon the physical plane as the soul, he will himself, with full continuity of consciousness, carry out the processes of abstraction, and will then, with directed purpose, ascend to the place from whence he came. This is the reflection in the three worlds of the divine ascension of the perfected Son of God. Excerpts on death from other writings. The process of death is occultly as follows. 1. The first stage is the withdrawal of the life force in the etheric vehicle from the dense physical body and the consequent falling into corruption and becoming scattered to the elements. Objective man fades out and is no more seen by the physical eye, though still in his etheric body. When etheric vision is developed, the thought of death will assume very different proportions. When a man can be seen functioning in his etheric physical body by a majority of the race, the dropping of the dense body will be considered just as a release. 2. The second stage is the withdrawal of the life force from the etheric body, and its devitalization. 3. The third stage is the withdrawal of the life force from the astral or emotional form so that it disintegrates in a similar manner and the life is centralized elsewhere. It has gained an increase of vitality through physical plane existence and added color through emotional experience. 4. The final stage for the human being is its withdrawal from the mental vehicle. The life forces after this fourfold abstraction are centralized entirely in the soul. The law of attraction breaks up the forms and draws back to primal sources the material of those forms, prior to rebuilding them anew. On the path of evolution, the effects of this law are well known, not only in the destruction of discarded vehicles, but in the breaking up of the forms in which great ideals are embodied. All eventually break under the working of this law. End of page 298. I would here remind you that a law is in reality the effect of the life of a greater entity as it encloses a lesser within its living processes. It embodies that formulated purpose or organized will of an enfolding life, against which the expressed purpose or determined will of that which is enfolded is entirely helpless. You might argue, brother of mine, that this statement negates the free will of the individual unit thus enclosed or enfolded. It assuredly does militate against the form aspect of manifestation, that aspect, for instance, of which a human being is preeminently conscious. Therefore, this relationship of the higher or greater and the lower or lesser, will equally and assuredly dominate and eventually render futile the lesser laws of the form nature, those which today are called the laws of nature. The laws of nature, the soul and life. We have, therefore, three groups of laws which govern the expression of the living purpose in this second solar system, one developed and another developing, with the third latent and relatively quiescent. 1. The laws of nature, the separative laws of the form nature. 2. The laws of the soul, the blending laws of group integrity. 3. The laws of life, the dynamic laws of being itself. It is with certain aspects of the laws of the soul that we shall now deal, for they concern the integrity and activity of the soul in form. This must be most carefully borne in mind. Disease is something which attacks the integrity or the harmony of the form nature which the inner spiritual man must order to make his contacts in the three worlds which constitute his environment when in incarnation. The 10 laws which we shall consider might, therefore, be regarded as 10 subsidiary laws of the fundamental law of essential integrity. They constitute 9 elaborations or aspects of that one law, and this you must have most carefully in mind. It is with these laws that the true healer must ever work. The 6 rules deal only with the application of this realized integrity to the conditions and situation with which the healer is confronted. Integrity involves focus, tension and expression, simultaneously realized, consciously generated and dynamically used. Qualities required of the healer. 1. The power to contact and work as a soul. The art of the healer consists in releasing the soul. Think for a moment what this power involves. The healer is not only in immediate and conscious touch with his own soul, but through that soul contact he can easily contact the soul of his patient. 2. The power to command the spiritual will. The particular law involved in the healing act must be brought into activity by the spiritual will. This necessitates the capacity to make contact with the spiritual triad. Therefore, the antakarana must be somewhat in process of construction. 3. The power to establish telepathic rapport. The healer must know the inner stage of thought and of desire of his patient. 4. He must have exact knowledge. We read that he must know the point exact through which relief must come. This is a most important point and one entirely overlooked by the so-called healers in such movements as Christian Science, Unity and others. Healing does not come through an intense affirmation of divinity, or by simply pouring out love and the expression of a vague mysticism. It comes through mastering an exact science of contact, of impression, of invocation, plus an understanding of the subtle apparatus of the etheric vehicle. 5. The power to reverse, reorient and exalt the consciousness of the patient. The healer has to lift the downward focused eyes unto the soul. This refers to the eyes of the patient. This statement implies limitation, because if the patient is not at the stage in evolution where this is possible, and at the point in evolution where he can contact his own soul, the work of the healer is rendered inevitably futile. The sphere of action, therefore, of the spiritual healer is strictly limited to those who have faith. Faith, however, is the evidence of things not seen. That evidence is largely lacking in the majority. Faith is not wishful thinking or an engineered hope. It is evidence of a well-grounded conviction. End of page 299. 6. Power to direct soul energy to the necessary area. The spiritual or the third eye then directs the healing force. This presupposes a scientific technique on the healer's part and the right functioning of the mechanism of received and directed force within the head. 7. Power to express magnetic purity and the needed radiance. The healer must achieve magnetic purity, and attain dispelling radiance. This involves great personal discipline in the daily life, and the habit of pure living. Purity inevitably and automatically results in radiance. 8. Power to control the activity of the mechanism of the head. The healer must have linked the centers in the head. The true healer has established a magnetic area within his head which presents itself or expresses itself through a definitely recognizable radiation. 9. Power over his own centers. The healer has to concentrate the needed energy within the needed center. The center in the patient's form which is nearest to the seat of the physical trouble has to be made receptive to the energy discharged into it by the corresponding center in the healer's body. It will be obvious to you, therefore, how much knowledge and energy control is required by the true healer. 10. Power to utilize both the exoteric and esoteric methods of healing. The healer will employ methods of occult healing, though the ordinary medical and surgical methods will not be withheld. I have constantly emphasized the God-given nature of experimental medicine, which is a phrase qualifying medicine today, and qualifying still more metaphysical healing. There is no need to call in a spiritual healer for broken bones or for those difficulties which orthodox medicine has already mastered. However, the patient's general morale and condition can be justifiably helped whilst wise surgery and ameliorating medical knowledge are applied. This the usual so-called metaphysical healer is apt to ignore. Healers will be divided eventually into two groups. A. Those comprising definitely trained spiritual healers. B. Healers with less developed power but with enough radiation and magnetism to aid in the ordinary healing process. These will usually work under the guidance of the spiritual healer. 11. Power to work magnetically. Thus he can pour the vital healing force upon the patient. This the healer does through a scientific coordination of his equipment, using the hands as a directing agent. In this way the disease can be healed, ameliorated or worsened, even to the point of death. The responsibility of the healer is therefore great. 12. Power to work with radiation. Thus can his presence feed the soul life of the patient. This again is brought about through coordination, but the agent of radiation is then the aura, not the hands. 13. Power to practice at all times complete harmlessness. The method used by the Perfect One is harmlessness. This, we are told, involves a positive expression of poise, an inclusive point of view, and divine understanding. How many healers combine these three qualities and also work through love? 14. Power to control the will and work through love. The healer must keep the will in leash. This is one of the most difficult qualities to be developed, for the will of the healer is frequently so potent in its determination to bring about a healing that it renders the effort to apply that healing process entirely futile. From the reverse angle, frequently the sentimental and mystical desire to love the patient negates all efforts to hold the will in leash. Remember, brother of mine, the spiritual will must be present as a quiet deep pool of power behind all expression of the energy of love. 15. Power eventually to wield the law of life. Of this little can be said, for it can only be wielded by those who have developed or who are rapidly developing the consciousness of the spiritual triad. The healer in the New Age will possess the ability to make the following contacts. 1. With his own soul. 2. With the soul of the patient. 3. With the particular type of energy found either in the soul or the personality ray of the patient. 4. with any one of his own centers which is needed by him in order to act as a transmitting agency for energy to be sent into an area governed by some center in the body of the patient. 5. With the center in the patient's etheric body which controls the area where the disease is located. End of page 300. End of chapter 58.